Okay, welcome everybody. Adventures Live 2021. Our panel is Sex as a Healing Tool. I'm going to introduce you to our lovely panelists, starting with Rita Nketia, who is currently a researcher at Human Rights Watch. She's been active in the feminist movement for over a decade. That is really a long time to be doing feminist work, because that's oof. Also, she has a PhD from York University in Toronto. Wow. I miss the feminist work. Guys, like, the person sitting right here is just, yeah. And she's part of the first working group for Adventures Live and is currently a board member for Drama Queens. Our next guest is Leila Yahaya. She's a queer Muslim feminist and a human rights activist. Leila lives her life as a political statement and as a way to create more opportunities for women and LGBTIQ persons to claim their spaces, own and speak up, and further the movement. She is co-founder and executive director of One Love Sisters Ghana. Next, we have Miko John, who is a queer projects lead for Drama Queens and a certified peer counselor. Thank you guys so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having us.
So we are going in with our first question. So what does sex mean to you? So yeah, take it up. Leila?
Okay. So personally, sex to me is a connection, an intimate connection with either yourself or with someone else. Yeah.
Thanks, Leila. Miko?
Well, sex is pleasure. I think sex for me is the act itself and the pleasure that I derive from it. I don't necessarily attach intimacy to sex, although I think it's possible. But then I think for me, my priority is the pleasure that comes with sex.
Yeah.
So I think the act and the pleasure that I get from the act. Yeah.
Thanks.
I think I'll definitely echo what my panelists have said. Sex for me is an experience of intimacy, of connection with one or multiple people. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So Miko, what's your take on healing?
I would say that when it comes to healing is being able to accept who you are after the trauma. Because I feel like when you get the trauma, when you go through trauma, there's this, you cannot be the old you again because trauma sort of morphs you into someone else. So I think that healing is when you're able to accept who you are after the fact and the journey that comes with being able to accept yourself.
I just say I really like that point about accepting who you are after the trauma. That's sort of part of the healing, because trauma fundamentally changes who we are and it changes our experience of the world. You know, and I think what part of the healing process is coming to that knowing or that acceptance or understanding that you are not the same person after the trauma, right? But it doesn't mean that you can't go on to have a fulfilling life or, you know, but it just means that it has changed you, right? And you have to orient yourself to this new person that you become, you know, and that's part of the healing journey. I really like that.
Awesome.
Yeah. I also think it's very good for you to also own the process, right? To feel sane again. Because healing without feeling sane is like you're not doing anything. You need to reclaim all that and then reaffirm yourself to feel on again, to feel whole again. Yeah.
The need for affirmations. So looking at sex as a healing tool, what do you think that would look like individually versus communally?
I mean, I think that sex in itself, it's something that's, for me, I think that when it comes to sex, it's able to transfer you to a fantasy place where you don't have to deal with reality.
Yeah.
So I think that sometimes some people would need sex just to escape the reality that they've been in, so that for them to be able to heal, they'll just like go to a place that is fantasy and you don't have to deal with the bullshit that you're going through.
Yeah.
So with sex, I think that a lot of people use it. You can use it as a coping mechanism so that you're able to deal with the trauma that you went through. Sometimes it's too much for you to deal with at that moment.
Yeah.
So you need like a fantasy land to be able to process what you've been through. So you can use sex for that. People use other things like music, movies, reading, whatever. So sex can also be that. And because you derive pleasure from sex, it's easy for you to be able to compartmentalize the things that you went through. Yeah.
That's awesome stuff. That actually made me think about role play and also some forms of BDSM, where you move to a different dimension, actually. Like, that's how I view it. Like, you're moving to you're in a different space with taking up different roles, being a different person. And how would this actually help you heal,
I feel like I can't answer that question because I don't really do a lot of BDSM or kink or role playing. But I'm curious from anybody else who who does
so
it.
I think I'll chip in there. When it comes to pleasure, I always say that pleasure is always not enough without a little bit of pain. And
Okay,
girl.
yeah. At times, you need a little bit of pain to push you up there.
Yeah.
At times, you think you're feeling better being up there, but that pleasure is not enough. It's not able to make you feel the way you want to feel. I say this because we have some ladies who say, okay, when you suck my nipples, I feel good. But when you suck my nipples and you don't give me that tiny bites, I don't feel whole. I don't feel wet for you. Like, you can suck it the whole day, but I won't feel good.
Yeah.
But with that little pain, I'll be able to feel okay. Yes.
Taking things to the next level.
Exactly.
I like that.
I think in relation with BDSM, in my opinion, I think it has a lot to do with power, like relinquishing it and taking care of someone else's power. So BDSM comes with a lot of release, and I think that it can also be very cathartic because you are able to transfer your energies into something else. And when it comes to healing, being able to relinquish the power that the trauma has on you can be done through BDSM because it sort of has the same levels, especially when it comes to relinquishing and taking back the power that was taken from you.
Bringing in power, like the power play when it comes to healing. Because I feel like a lot of people have to heal because of power. Like, it's either because you've lost your power or maybe you have too much power. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, the question you asked earlier about sex as healing, I think it's a really important one. And unfortunately, the reality is that for many of us, sex is actually the site of the trauma in the first place, and that needs to be dealt with before we can even get to the possibility of healing.
Yeah.
And so it's not to romanticize that sex can be healing. It can. But particularly for women, for marginalized groups, like for people who have maybe grew up in a purity culture or a highly conservative society, we're not taught to connect with our sexual selves. Yeah. Right. Many of us don't know what we're doing when we start out having sex.
Yep.
And that can continue for many, many years.
Yeah.
If you don't empower yourself to say, you know what, I can own this sexual experience that I'm having. Right. And so I think for me, again, thinking about healing as a journey, that sexual experience or the healing through sex is also a journey, right? And it requires us to first understand what are the ways in which I have been oppressed, right? Sexually, right? Like, what are the ways in which I haven't been able to express myself, or, maybe I went through a very violent first encounter with sex, and so all of those things have to be addressed and dealt with before we can even get to the sex as a healing thing. But I think then in terms of what sex as healing can actually look like, of course, for me, it's about being able to bring my full self to the sexual experience, right? Being able to experiment
Yeah.
and try different things and communicate, like, this is what I like, I don't like this, touch me this way.
Yeah.
Just being able to be vocal and having that reciprocated, having somebody say, okay, you don't want to be touched this way, I'll touch you this way, like just having that clear communication. I think for me, that's how sex has been able to be healing for me. Just being able to own, like, show up as my full self in the experience, and I think so many of us still struggle with that.
To say, I want to add something to what you said. When you said that the sex is the site of your trauma, it's very interesting because we have something called flooding in psychology where people are exposed to something that they fear.
Yeah.
And sex being the site of your trauma is sort of flooding, because you sort of reintroduce yourself to a scenario that makes you scared or sort of brings the trauma back. And I think that before you're able to venture into something like that, you have to be able to reintroduce yourself to your body, because your body was violated. So sometimes it's hard for you to recognize your body after the violation. So it has to come with you reintroducing yourself to your body, being sure you're comfortable enough with your body now before the trauma. So, so that's what I wanted to say.
Oh, thank you, Miko. I never really thought about that being, in the same tangent. So I usually would think about sex as a coping mechanism in the way that people would be using, like, drugs to just feel better, I never really saw it, like, as part of the healing process. So it's just, an eye-opener for me personally, yeah.
Personally, I also think it has to do with the mindset and what you carry into it. It has to do with the conscious intentions we have during sex, just like taking drugs. People take drugs for so many reasons. So it has to do with the conscious mindset.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, most people think that using sex as a form of healing is a Western import. So how true is that, first of all?
Personally, I think it's not a foreign import. It has been in existence, but maybe we didn't know about it.
Yeah.
That's what I think about that. I think our parents do have sex to feel okay, to feel relaxed, because at times they are tense, they are anxious. So they do make out to feel okay. And this has been with us since childhood. So I don't think this is something, if we are going to say that using sex as a healing tool is a foreign export or import, then...
Import.
It's a foreign import. That means we are trying to say that sex itself is a foreign import in the first place. Yeah.
True. That actually makes me think about how sex has been used as a form of healing, like, since sex happened. So yeah. Wow.
I would agree with that, actually. Yeah. I think part of the problem is that we talk about, in many of our cultures, we talk about sex as a functionality thing, right? So we do it so that we can reproduce. We don't talk about it as something that can heal us or. And so I think then there's a misconception that it's not possible to heal from sex, or that people don't do that, right? We do. We just maybe don't have enough spaces where we can articulate that.
Yeah.
And part of that is because we are in a purity culture, because we are in, kind of a conservative society where, again, the conversation about sex, or at least the public conversations, there's a limited frame for how we can talk about sex, right? We talk about it in relation to reproduction, like childbearing or child rearing, things like that. But certainly, like, sex can be used as a healing tool for anybody in any society. Like, I think we need to move past this idea of they do things like that over there and we do things like this over here. I think we all do it. It's just that in some societies there's more space to talk about it than in others. I think also it's also important to say that I feel like for a lot of African women, we're not taught to explore pleasure or even sex as pleasure. right? Like we don't create that space, particularly for women, to just have sex for the sake of having sex, and then to articulate that and to create spaces to have those conversations. And I think this is why Adventures Live is so important, because this is the space where we can actually stop and say, you know what, let's just talk about sex because we want to talk about sex and pleasure is important to us, you know. But I think for a lot of us, we don't come out of a family context or a socialization context where sex for ourselves can just be about pleasure and nothing else, and nobody else's pleasure. It's always about somebody, you know, someone else. So I think we still have a long way to go, unfortunately. But, you know, to the question, definitely I think that sex as healing is something that happens across our society.
I want to say that at times we attach a lot of things to sex. Something like religion, dogma, and so on from our backgrounds. And all these things add up and make us not own the sexual, our sexuality, and also how we make out. Yeah.
Oh, those are very, very good additions. Like, my mind is blown right now.
Yeah. I also just say, like, the concept of healing itself. I mean, so I think about this in the context of like mental health, right? Again, it's another area that we don't talk about enough within our cultural context. And so I think the general conversation of healing is one that we don't have enough, or it happens like in the context of church, right? That's where you go to heal. Right? And so if church is the only site of healing, what is the possibility that you can talk about sex as healing within the context of the church? Right? There's already kind of a confined or limited way that we can talk about healing, generally speaking. And I feel like we need to make more space for the concept of healing itself. Right? And then we can talk about the different ways that we can heal, or the different areas of our lives that healing is possible or necessary.
I think when it comes to religion, especially, we do. There is a lot. It's one thing I would say is that people do find peace in believing in something higher, and then I think that a lot of people do get healing from that. The idea of that your life is not in your own control, that there's something bigger. It sort of relieves you of the responsibility of taking care of yourself in a sense. So even though there are a lot of issues, let me put it that way, for lack of a better word, there are a lot of issues with religion itself. It does serve as a source of healing for a lot of people, because once you have the idea that your life is in the hands, or there's a bigger picture, it makes it easier for you to go through life, because life is hard. And then having the idea that there's something bigger that is taking care of you, it's sort of relieves you of the stress that comes with life.
So I'm coming back to power again. So how does healing tie in with power? Like, yeah. How do they tie in together?
Okay, so I think that we've talked a lot about trauma, and trauma essentially is your power being taken away from you. Yeah. That's essentially what it is. So healing is you trying to find ways of dealing with the loss of the power that you lost.
Yeah.
And trying to sort of give way to the new you that is coming because of the power that you've lost, and how you can gain back that power that you lost, basically. So I think healing has a lot to do with the general cycle of power, like the loss, the acceptance of the loss, and then gaining it back. I think that's what it is.
Well said.
Okay, so Miko, how would this process look like in an everyday scenario?
I think it really is different for everybody. Everybody's journey is very different. I think that a lot of people do different things to accept the loss that they've had. Conversation is one of them. Being able to talk about it, being able to give yourself the chance to feel the feelings. And then a lot of people also need catharsis, where you channel that anger, that pain, and releasing it in different forms. We have people punching things. We have people that eat. We have like different ways of performing the catharsis. So really the journey is very different for people. My recommendation would be to talk to someone, because being able to vocalize your emotions sort of puts things in perspective for you. You're able to say the things you want to say if you sort of have a perspective on what you're saying. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, you're able to vocalize what you want, your feelings, if you have a good idea of how you're feeling.
Yeah.
So being able to talk to someone actually helps a lot, in my opinion. Yeah.
You wanted to add?
I just wanted to ask a question.
Yeah.
So what if you can't be vocal about this? Because at times it's very difficult to vocalize your feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what if you can't be vocal?
I think, like I said, people have different ways of dealing with their stress, and being able to be vocal about it takes time. Not everybody's able to do that. But eventually, if you become very not comfortable, but you become okay with saying how you felt at that moment, how you're feeling now, it really sort of puts everything in perspective for you. I think the reason why it's difficult for some people to speak about it is because of how hard it is to like put your feelings into words. So once you're able to be comfortable enough to do that, that will help a lot of people. And there are so many other ways of dealing with the traumas, not just conversations.
So I'm thinking about this question around like the relationship between healing and power, and I think about it in the context of my life as a queer woman, right? Yeah. Because I think for me, that those moments where I can be with women physically, intimately, are powerful because it's it was a journey to get to that point where I could be with a woman and feel free and feel comfortable, right? Because you have to do the travel through the patriarchy and the homophobia, and when you're just with a woman and it just feels right.
Yeah.
It just feels right.
Yeah.
You know, for me, it's powerful.
Yeah.
It's empowering. And it's a big fuck you to patriarchy and to homophobia, right? And so I think, and that there's a healing in that. Because I'm also an activist, like I spend a lot of time fighting these systems in my public life, and it's exhausting, right? It weighs on us emotionally.
Yeah.
And so the experience of being with your lover, those moments are tender and they're restorative and they're healing. And so I think it's really important for me to be able to create those moments with women where we can just be, right? And we don't have to sort of think about all of these systems that we're fighting. Yeah. And in fact, in being together, we are actually fighting those systems, right?
Basically, yeah.
And we are finding ways to have pleasure and to restore ourselves. Yeah.
Wow. My favorite thing about that is how it's a big fuck you to the patriarchy.
Yeah.
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 Awesome stuff. Okay, Miku, back to your comment about talking to someone. I'm wondering, about... So if you want to talk to someone, I'm thinking about, like, how do you pick someone to talk to? Because I've had a situation where I went to the Legon hospital to go see a psychologist because I thought I might have ADHD, and this man laughed in my face. So like this is even like a mental health thing. Like and to go in and to be talking about like sex and like how do you pick someone? And also, would it be necessary to talk to a professional, or it's just you could find the healing also in just talking to friends and family?
I think it's talking to someone who makes you comfortable. Like because you are able to express yourself when you're comfortable. When you're not comfortable, you're not able to express yourself. So yes, there are professionals, if I could call them that, who unfortunately don't understand the importance of their practice.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people like that in all the fields of life. Like we have people who are good and we have people who are bad. I think recommendation is important. Like we have organizations that you can talk to that can like direct you to the right people. Like we have Adventures Live like this. We have Drama Queens. We have other organizations that can help you deal with these issues. We have, unfortunately, realistically, therapy is expensive.
Yeah.
So it's good to have people you can talk to, and that can be possible if you're comfortable with a person.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be a professional. It can be someone you're really comfortable with, someone you can trust. Somewhere you can give your bank account to, like that. Yeah.
Bank accounts, there's science inside, though, but yeah, finding someone you trust. So also, I'm wondering, would there also be, if somebody wanted to find like resources, is there like any particular place they could go?
In my understanding, I know every government hospital is supposed to have like a psychologist. Every like government institute. I worked in Efia Kwanta, which is like the regional office in Takrady, the regional hospital in Takrady. And we had psychologists there. Unfortunately, for some reason, a lot of people don't know that. And I think that in my understanding, I know every single government institution, government hospital is supposed to have a psychologist, and these people have resources. And now we live in a world of the internet, and I think that there's a lot of information on the internet, unfortunately. But once you are able to get good sites and resources to talk about these issues, we have a lot of platforms where you can talk about these issues. Twitter is one of them. But unfortunately, you have to find places that are safe for you. So, like I said, the internet has a lot of information. You can read there, but you have to like be very careful because there's a lot of information on the internet. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So going back to our definitions on what sex means to us, we had a lot of, definitions looking at intimacy and one without the intimacy. So I'm wondering, in a scenario where you don't have intimacy, where it's just casual sex, fuck you today, maybe I see you tomorrow. Like, how would healing look like in such an instance?
If I'm like healing through casual sex, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Well, I think for me, like I said, I don't necessarily attach intimacy to sex. There is intimacy that can be found in sex. I don't necessarily attach the two together.
Yeah.
So with casual sex, I think because you're being introduced to new experiences, it sort of helps you rediscover your body, if that makes sense. Like when you're having casual sex, you're able to like try different things. You could do that with the same partner, but then when there's another person, that is a different energy. So it could help with the rediscovering of yourself, of your body, of your pleasures, and also the spontaneous effect of casual sex is fun. And that could be a good way of you sort of like escaping. So it really depends on the person and how they view casual sex and how it can help them.
This is it's an interesting question, right? Because it assumes that casual sex can't be intimate and that there's a kind of distance from the person. I mean, when I think about casual sex, yes, casual sex can be not meaningless, but not, you can have the casual sex and not be feel a sense of connection to the person. But then you can have a casual encounter that is really meaningful and can be really healing, right? If, for example, you haven't had sex in a long time, you haven't been touched. I remember when I was in school and I was living on my own, and it had been months. It had been months since I had touched anyone or anyone had touched me. And then to have an encounter with somebody who I wasn't dating, this wasn't my person, but they, they were soft with me, and they took their time, right? I think when we think about casual sex, we think about it as something that happens quickly. It's rushed, like you just, wham bam, thank you, ma'am, and you go, kind of thing, right? But for me, I mean, these days in particular, I think the sex that I'm most interested in is the kind of sex that is slow, thoughtful. And that can happen, casually. And I think in those moments, you can be healed from that. You can be restored from that. So it is possible, and it has happened in my own life. I don't have as many casual sexual encounters these days, but yeah, I believe that it is something that we can be healed from.
Oh, I thought you were adding up.
Okay. So I'm gonna say that to me, sex is sex, either casually or with my regular partner, right? So I feel at times you can have sex with your partner and not feel even sane with that. And you can have sex with just someone, just a casual sex, and then you'll feel okay and feel good. So to me, sex is sex. And it depends on the intentions you carry in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it still boils down to that.
Yeah.
The intentions you carry in there.
Yeah. I love that. I love the intention bit because I feel like it's something that people forget a lot of the time. Like, it's not something people think of, when you're having sex, thinking of what is this going to do for me? What am I getting? Like, thinking about the healing aspect of the sex is something that we hardly do. Well, I personally hardly do. So yeah, it's something that I'm going to move with going forward. Yeah. Okay. So next, I was thinking looking at survivors of sexual abuse, how would they be able to gain healing from sex? Because you've had like a traumatic thing happen to you, and revisiting that again, how would the healing be like?
Okay, so for me, when I went through sexual abuse, I didn't really process it, to be honest. I didn't. It took 3 years before I actually processed it, because I finally spoke to a friend of mine, and I think I was still having sex, but then because I hadn't processed it. It took me a while after I did come to terms with the fact that, okay, you were sexually abused. It's time for you to deal with that. I think I started my healing process after I came into the realization of how I was hurt. I think that's what happened. So when it comes to sex as a healing for survivors or victims, it really depends on you sort of recoiling into yourself and understanding what has happened to you. Like, you have to first come to the actualization that you were hurt before you can do any healing, whether with sex or without it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll not be able to have sex even though you'd gone to the trauma. So for me, when I started having sex again, after I was abused, I started having sex I think a week after, and I hadn't really processed the issue because of what happened. So after I finally spoke to a friend, it took me a while to get back, because after I actually vocalized how I felt in the moment, I felt disgusting. So it took me a while back to sort of start loving myself and my body. So I wasn't having sex for a while before I started engaging again. So it really has a lot to do with rediscovering yourself. Yeah.
At times too, it takes longer than you ever think. I remember going through a sexual abuse where it has to take me more than 10 years to start processing it. When I finally had friends that sat to talk about their virginity, then I realized that, this thing, I never had it. How was mine stolen? Before I could identify what happened to me. And that was when I started processing it. Even before, when I started processing it, it rather put me on a certain scale where I started having more sex to be able to accept whatever happened to me. So when I started owning up and reclaiming myself, I started pinpointing things. When someone is touching me, I'm very aggressive. I'm like, don't touch me this way. Don't do this. No, stop. I don't want to do it. You get it? So at times I feel it's a process, and how you also process it. Yeah. It's a whole journey.
Yeah. I wanted us to look at sex work. Yeah? And how that ties in with sex as a healing tool. Because it's just the trade, the trade. I remember we had one production where we were talking about a story of a sex worker, and she saw herself as being someone who's in a way kind of like a therapist for some of her clients because she is there. Like sometimes they come there and then they just have conversations, or it's for her, she's trying to heal them from maybe their own past traumas. So like also looking at how they tie in together.
I think sex workers play a very important role in a lot of people's healing, and we don't give them enough credit for that.
We really don't.
Because as you said, oftentimes they're not actually even having sex. They're just sitting with people and hearing their stories, letting people process. I think for me, I have engaged sex workers before, and those were interesting moments because it was sort of liberatory in a way. They gave me a sense of freedom to explore without judgment. So I can think of one experience when I was in Kenya. Kenya has a sort of big sex workers rights movement, and I was fortunate enough to attend a sex workers rights party, and it was organized by a friend of mine at the time. And I didn't know what to expect, I had never been to a sex party rather, or been a part of like sex workers' rights spaces. And it was quite interesting to sort of see, to be there and experience them, and then like got my own lap dance, and it was nice. I was much younger, and I was kind of early in my own sexual liberation journey. And so I think for me, what it did is that it opened up like what was possible for my sex life, and I needed that at that age, at that time in my life. I needed to feel, I was coming out of like a religious, socially conservative context, and I needed to be in a space where I felt free to explore my sexual self without any judgment, and so I was very thankful to those women, and to the men, because there were some male sex workers there as well. But yeah, I think sex work can be, and it can be a moment where you can just sort of explore yourself, without feeling like you're being judged, or I think it's very important that we support sex workers in that way, and the sort of work that the kind of support that they provide us in being able to heal certain parts of ourselves.
I feel like also, like you said earlier, we don't give sex workers the amount of credit they deserve. And looking at how sex workers, even in Ghana and even Nigeria, get treated, it's just appalling to me. Because, these are people who get abused on the streets, they get harassed, and these are the same people providing essential work. So,
essential work. I like that. Yeah.
Because like the trauma people are going through, and the help they get from sex workers, it's just, it's really sad how, and it's so funny too, because this is like an occupation that's been there since time immemorial. Like even in the Bible, right? Like one of Jesus' like closest people was a sex worker. And it's just anyways. Any more additions?
What Rita said, she said that when you were there, like you were devoid of any judgment, and I think that's what it does for a lot of people. When you are with a sex worker, you are able to be vulnerable, because you know you're not going to be judged, and that in itself, being able to be vulnerable in itself sort of helps with the healing. So it is a very essential work, like you put it, because it's very difficult for you to find a space where you can be vulnerable, and knowing that being with a sex worker sort of provides you an avenue for you to be vulnerable is very, very powerful.
I love how also everybody has had very different and very varying ways of healing, like healing circumstances regarding sex. And I feel like this is something that we also didn't realize at those points in time, that this is something that is healing for me. So just to end our session, is there anything that you'd want to leave our audience with?
I think for me, conversation is important. I really do believe in the power of being able to be communicative. Like the spaces like these are very important because it's very hard for you to be able to vocalize your ideas of healing and sex and stuff like that, especially because of the conservative country that we live in. So I think conversation is important. I think it's important for you to find space that make you give you avenues for you to be vulnerable to speak your truth. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Rita?
I'll go.
Yeah. Let's give her a little time.
Yeah. So I'll just say that, I mean, sex as healing, it's a journey.
Yeah.
You know, and I think we should be kind and patient with ourselves. And as, thanks to Google and the internet, there are resources out there. Read about, sex, read about other people's sex lives.
Yeah.
And just give yourself that space and opportunity to go through this journey. And also to know that, like, you deserve to have a pleasurable sex life if that's what you want.
Yeah.
We deserve it, right? And so just to sort of be kind with yourself and to give yourself that space to explore.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Rita.
Okay. Okay, so I think my colleagues have actually said a lot, and I'm going to add up. Change is very difficult to come by, and it's very difficult to process. Change is not easy. It's a journey. But gradually, when you put your mind at it, you'll be able to do it.
Yeah.
And we should stop putting limitations on sex.
Yeah.
Sex is sex, so we should just enjoy it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sex is sex. Just enjoy it. That's like, I love how that is like how we're ending this session. Okay. So guys, I want to say it should. Just enjoy it.
Just enjoy it.
Sex is sex in front and the back. Just
enjoy
it. I love that, guys. Okay. So thank you so much for being here today and for giving your energies and your time. I'm super grateful. So on behalf of Adventures Live, thank you. And yeah, that's our session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.